Well, good morning, committee. I think now the microphone's working now. Sounds like it is anyway. I know yesterday said on WebEx, they said they couldn't hear the microphones up on this end, so looks like we got it where it's working. So welcome, everyone, and today we're going to talk about the Kansas Water Office, and I think we'll start off with Connie Owen as the Director of Water Office, and we'll let her make her presentation first, and then we'll do the budget shortly after that. So we should have enough time to get that all in, and then if we have might have a presentation on the Department of Agriculture if they get here today yet too. So, but mainly we're going to talk about the Water Office and their budget, and we'll begin with welcome Ms. Owen to the committee, and actually hear what you have to say. And congratulations on being appointed to your position. So that's taken care of.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, I'm Connie Owen, the Director of the Kansas Water Office, and Senator Kirshen, thank you, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to present today on the budget for the Water Office. And I'd also like to introduce Kara Hendricks, who's the Assistant Director for the Water Office. We also have connected online Matt Unruh, who's our Chief of Communications and Policy, and we also have Deborah Jones, who's our Chief Financial Officer. So we have all kinds of people available to answer questions if they come up. In your materials today, we have provided written testimony. We have provided our budget overview, the Kansas Water Authority's annual report, and what I'm going to use as a guide this morning, which is the slide deck for the slides that you will see up on the screen. On to the next slide, please. Just in general, the Kansas Water Office is the state agency charged with planning and coordination and overseeing implementation of water projects of all kinds, whether it's groundwater, surface water, having enough water, or water quality issues. Those are all within our purview. The primary responsibility and charge from the legislature is to create the state water plan. And that's a plan that identifies current and future issues and needs and programs and initiatives for addressing those needs. The Kansas legislature also set aside a state water plan fund specifically to fund those projects, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later. On the next page, you will see an agency overview. We have two primary programs within the Water Office. The Water Planning and Implementation Program, which you see on the left side, has three main components. The Kansas Water Authority is an advisory board made up of appointees from all across the state, and by statute, they have to represent a wide variety of stakeholders and interests in all things water. And I would like to thank Senator McGinn for her service as a member of that board. Jumping over to the right a little bit, we're also in charge of drought monitoring, which I believe you can understand how important that is. We lead the drought response team for the state. In the center of that right part is water planning. That's the workhorse. That's our primary charge. And as I said, we develop the state water plan. We do that with input from an incredible army of people. We have our 14 regional advisory committees throughout the state that are identified by our 14 watersheds. And these are local people, boots on the ground, who are living and breathing the issues, and they get together with our planners and our staff to identify their issues and make recommendations as to how those issues can be addressed and recommendations for what should be funded. Their recommendations go to the Kansas Water Authority, that advisory board. Again, that's made up of people who are not our staff. They're individuals out throughout the entire state, and they present recommendations, which they're required to do by law, for pending legislation, and most importantly, for funding of the state water plan. So when you talk about how to spend too little money when you have a lot of water issues, the Water Authority is the one that makes the recommendation for those particular funds. Our second primary program is the public water supply. The Kansas Water Office acts primarily in this vein, essentially as a water utility. We're in charge of providing water for many residents throughout the state, municipalities and industries, through the use of storage in reservoirs. So we contract with the federal government for storage within the federal reservoirs, and we then turn around and contract with municipalities and industries throughout the state for their use of that water from those reservoirs. The next slide, please. On this next slide, you'll see a representation of the sources of funding for the Water Office, depicted as our expenditures in recent history and then recommended for fiscal year 2022. The three primary funds are the State General Fund, which you see at the bottom, that blue, and that funds 9.5 positions in our office. It handles the office operations, salaries, wages for those positions, and whatnot. The orange is the State Water Plan Fund, which, as I mentioned, is supposed to pay for those water programs. It is made up of 3 different funding sources. One is fee funds, which we have user fee funds that feed into that. And for purposes of discussion with you today, the State General Fund, by statute, is supposed to transfer $6 million into the State Water Plan Fund each year, and the Economic Development Initiatives Fund is supposed to transfer $2 million into that fund each year, for a total of $8 million in demand transfers. It has been many years since that full amount has been transferred in. It's been since 2008. Currently, we are, if one was to add up the arrears, we're $80 million in arrears. So every year, the Water Authority recommends full restoration of those demand transfers. The other source of our funding is, as you see, the green, and that's the public water supply programs. That money comes in, as I said, through contracts by municipalities and users that are paying for use of water out of storage that we manage. On the next slide is a quick glimpse of our state agency. We're rather small. We have 20 positions authorized right now, and 4 of them are currently vacant. In order to comply with the 10% reduction in State General Fund, 1.5 of those vacancies will remain vacant. The next slide, just kind of by way of interest for you all, I mentioned the Kansas Water Authority. This is a depiction of where the members live, who they are, and who they represent. So by statute, they particular appointees have to be certain representatives of each stakeholder or each interest, such as the League of Municipalities and the Groundwater Management Districts and the Rural Water Association. On the next page, water planning. This is that middle component of our charge that we're required by statute to uphold. I'll just review this briefly because this doesn't address budget so much as what we actually do. But as I said, the State Water Plan is our main flagship responsibility. The 3 primary issue areas that State Water Plan addresses and has identified is our groundwater declines and our reservoir sedimentation, which means the reservoirs are filling up with sediment, which allows them to store less water, which is a problem for the municipalities and users that depend on that. It's also a problem when we have flooding, because then there's not enough room for the floodwaters to go, and they create more damage. It's also a problem when we have drought, because when we have drought, of course, we need more water, and if we don't have enough storage capacity, then we are less able to deal with the drought. The map on this page also represents those 14 regional advisory committee areas that I identified for you. So each one of those areas has a group of people that are engaged and informed and an integral statutory part of our process to inform what we do with water planning and to inform the recommendations for funding. On the following page, all these colors depict what pays into the State Water Plan Fund. So how is the State Water Plan Fund supported? And as I mentioned before, there are a number of fee funds. Those are listed with most of the lines along the bottom. You can take a closer look at your leisure. The two that I would draw your attention to today are the top two, that big dark purple. That is the State General Fund. And as I mentioned, by statute, there's supposed to be a $6 million demand transfer every year. And as you can see, more recently than 2008, that was reduced dramatically. Now, I do need to give a big thank you and a big shout out to the legislature from a year ago, because as you can see from that larger purple on the right, the legislature last year made a huge inroad into restoring that State General Fund transfer. Unfortunately, the COVID allotments took the enhancement away. So we were back to about $4.5 million instead of $6 million. The green is the Economic Development Fund transfer, which again is supposed to be $2 million. As you can see, that has also been dramatically reduced in recent years. So the Kansas Water Authority recommends full restoration of the $6 million and $2 million demand transfers into the State Water Plan. And remember, those monies are strictly dedicated to water projects. The next page is a depiction of our current budget recommendations for the State Water Plan Fund. Again, this comes from the Kansas Water Authority, and as they get together and put their heads together and decide on priorities, when there's never enough money to go around, you have to decide how best to spend what you have. This is informed by those local regional advisory committee people, the army of 140 some people, boots on the ground. It's also largely informed by and created through the advice of the state agencies involved. So if you look at this chart, I'm not going to take you deep into the numbers, but if you could look at the sections, the way this works, it's a little confusing and different than other agencies. The Water Plan Fund comes to the Water Office. The Water Office then pays for the implementation of programs as shown in this chart. So the Kansas Department of Health and Environment gets so much money for those listed programs that they implement. The Department of Agriculture gets so much money for those programs that they implement. And we have programs that we implement as well, and those are listed there. The Department of Wildlife and Parks, there was effort made to help fund an aquatic nuisance species initiative for them this year, but that is not going forward yet at this time. On the next page, this drills into part of that chart you just looked at. This is the State Water Plan Fund Kansas Water Office component. So these are the programs that we are engaged in, our staff, that we implement, and these are done in coordination with some other agencies. Some of them impact the federal government as well. So we have studies for things that need to be dealt with that we don't yet know enough about. And we also have, as you can see on one line, technical assistance to water users. We contract with the local Kansas Rural Water Association, and they spend time with individual producers throughout the state to help them. And they deal a lot with municipalities. They're very successful in identifying leakage and helping those municipalities save money. On the next page, you'll see, remember we had two primary programs. We had the Water Planning and Implementation Program, and we have the Public Water Supply Program. This is that second big component of what we do. This is a depiction of the reservoirs throughout the state that we're involved with managing. So all of the users that need water from those, and there are, I think, 2/3 of the state or relies on water from these sources, we're involved with this. And the contracts are different kinds. We have water marketing, water assurance, and access district. The fundamental common ground of all of that is local users pay for getting water out of storage, which we have to pay the federal government to help provide. On the next page is a visual of how that works in terms of just look at the shape of these ups and downs. We get paid for the use of water by users first. And then, because of billing cycles, we need to pay the federal government for storage, operation, and maintenance later in the year. So there are points in time where it looks like there's a whole bunch of money sitting there that nobody's using, but it's encumbered. And we have to pay it on the back end, either for our storage supplies or, as I said, for a number of our staff positions. As a final point, I might mention that our current FY 2022 budget does include some enhancements. And there was a situation in which budget returned to us, even though we requested a base budget and an enhanced budget. Likewise, the Kansas Water Authority requested a base budget and an enhanced budget. So we were given the opportunity for $660,000 that were left on the table. However, we could only distribute that within what the water office does. So if you remember that chart where we had the state water plan for the projects, and there were 4 state agencies, and we're one of those agencies, this money could only be spent on projects we're involved in. In other words, we could not say, oh, give this to the Department of Agriculture for something, give this to KDHE for something. The rules did not allow for that. So what is currently in the recommendation is $200,000 enhancement under our assessment and evaluation component. That includes flood response work that the legislature has specifically requested us to expand, and it includes other projects such as the Hayesville dewatering project. The other component was water technology farms, $100,000 added to that. These water technology farms, there are 17 of them throughout the state, and they are demonstration farms, but they're real farms. So there are producers who are operating their farms and their livestock, and we provide financial assistance to the use of water saving technology and soil health information, And so with their cooperation, we help them demonstrate innovative practices that are water saving and profitable. So these are very important demonstrations throughout the state, and they're very successful. We have requests each year from people to add to the list, so we're glad for that interest. And the third component was the watershed conservation practice implementation. This addresses nutrient runoff above these reservoirs. So I did mention that we have problems with the reservoirs silting in and losing capacity. We also have problems with quality of water in those reservoirs. And you may have heard of harmful algal blooms, and those are created with, as a chemical reaction from agricultural runoff into the reservoirs. So the idea is to help prevent that from happening. So the watershed conservation practice implementation provides funds for best management practices above reservoirs to help reduce the sedimentation and the nutrient inflow into the reservoirs. And that is the presentation for today. Again, thank you very much for your opportunity to be here, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. So committee, you have any questions up front for the director? Senator McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This kind of made sense to me. I guess when I first looked at this, this chart,
Okay.
it says all programs, and, you know, then I look at the sources of revenue, and to me, it almost seems like it ought to read all revenues. But
Would that be fair? Thank you.
it's the one and the same, right? To me, this is more of a revenue. Right. Yeah, it's the revenues, but then when she explained it, you explained the program. So anyway, I thought that was a little bit confusing, but that's just me.
I'm sorry if I confused you.
And then we didn't have one chart, at least in here. Our thing wasn't flowing exactly like yours at the beginning, but the one was your chart for who reports to who, I believe. I don't see that in here, but maybe it is in a different form. Okay, I want to get to the enhancements. I guess just for me, I've had issues with the water technology farms, and since you're new, you get to hear all this again. So we've had 3 directors that know exactly how I feel now. So the water technology farms, I think they do a good thing, and you said you're clear up to 17 now. And I don't know that we need to continue to expand that if they're diversified across the state. But I noticed that the governor did not approve the Arbuckle Group study. That way I'm reading this?
That is true.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, when we go to deliberate, I will have comments about the technology farms, and will be a proponent for trying to get the Arbuckle Group study going. One final
If
question.
I may,
Go ahead.
Senator, I'm sorry. The Arbuckle Group is working.
Right.
And there was money allocated last year, so the beginnings of that study are happening. And there has recently been a contract signed for the beginning scoping of the study. And in fact, we have a meeting next week to discuss that contract. So yes, we would prefer that we could address that more thoroughly in an ongoing fashion. But the work has begun.
Okay, well, I guess I'll wait to see what the scope is next week then, so. And then there was another program I'm trying to find that was similar to the technology farms that I actually liked. I put money in it last 2 years, in the hopes and anticipation that the money would be used in the Quivira rattlesnake area to help those farmers. I'm trying to think of the program because I always got it mixed up with the technology one. But I wanted money to go towards those farmers so that, they could change their drop nozzles, do better improvements on their irrigation to help them get out of this current situation we're in. Does somebody know the name of that program? I'm not seeing it in here.
Kara.
Okay. That's in KDA? Okay, and you're funding it? Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's all I had. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, any other questions, comments? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me go back up, get to the right page again. On your Water Authority members, it says that they're appointed by the governor or legislative leadership. Is that, how many years do these people serve? And I know you said they represent a wide variety of,
Yes.
of different experiences, but exactly how are those people, how do they apply for that? How do they get to those positions, and what determines how long they stay there?
Those things are largely all answered by statute, but to refer you back to the map that identifies everyone, I probably should clarify, this map depicts the voting members of the Water Authority. There are 13 voting members, and I'll answer your question about them. There are also 11 ex officio members that are basically the heads of the state agencies in Kansas that are integral part to all of the Water Authority activities and their meetings. Of these 13 voting members, 13 are appointed by the governor. The chair is at the pleasure of and subject to Senate confirmation. And that process is underway right now. The rest of the appointees by the governor are direct appointments. The two that are from legislative leadership, one is an appointment by the president of the Senate, and one is by the Speaker of the House. And I honestly have not been involved. I have been the chair, so I know what my process was, but I'm sorry, I can't answer, in general how that takes place. I think there is an effort to find knowledgeable, involved, fair, open-minded people that will work well together, because this board needs to work in a cooperative fashion.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. I was also interested in the Arbuckle study. I think any of us who took the geological survey tour and saw what was happening in Hutchison are aware that we really do need to understand what's happening when we're injecting into those wells, and how long we have to continue to work the program they have to provide water for their community. But it goes much farther because the Arbuckle comes to the surface in eastern Kansas. So I see that we have $68,000, that's the carry forward. And I'm assuming, I'm looking at, I know you have the slides, and then you also had your budget overview. So I'm looking on page 8.
Of the budget overview?
The budget overview. And so there was a $68,000 carry forward, and that's, I'm assuming, the money that you're using right now to set up the study and identify some of what wants to be done. Do you have a proposal for what would be needed next year to continue that study?
That would be the subject of this study group. The governor convened the various state agencies and stakeholders to meet together and put heads together and say, we have got to get on top of this. So this is a priority of the governor's, even though it's not in the recommended budget. It's a very high priority for the water office and the water authority as well. So the charge for that study group is to get the various players at the table together, because we're looking at municipal wastewater wells, and we're looking at oil and gas production wells. So we have two different state agencies involved in regulating those, as well as stakeholders that are involved with their businesses and livelihoods on the line. But this, I would agree with you, this should take a really high priority, and I hope we're able to enhance this. The original request from the Kansas Geological Survey to pursue this was a much higher figure, to really understand it and get on top of it, because what needs to happen when you're going to deal with something underground, you really need to understand as best you can what's going on down there. And we know some, but we do not know as much as we want to. So I would agree.
Senator Francis.
Mr. Chair, so this, the senator from Sedgwick may be able to help us with the timing. This may be appropriate to consider again at omnibus. And then we could give the water office some dates about, if that group is starting to meet, when a plan for that study might be available and what the cost might be in the coming year.
Yeah. I'm not, what's the report out date for the water office?
22nd, I think, February.
Okay. Well, so I think we're going to have more information then on Thursday.
Well, next week, we will review at our Arbuckle Study Group meeting, we will review the contract that was just signed. I'm not sure that the agenda goes into further steps, but that would certainly be the subject of the next meeting, which I hope we will be doing that frequently.
And I would go back to what Senator Francisco said and then just review it omnibus. That gives us more time to know something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. I noticed that in your enhancements for 22, one was the water injection dredging at Tuttle Creek.
Yes.
And that was 1.375 million. Has that been going on in the past?
The water injection dredging?
Yes.
We need to get a pilot program going, and we have the studies are started for that, right, Kara? But the whole idea is to create a pilot program to see if this water injection dredging strategy is successful and effective. So the project has not begun. The studies to support the project, but again, as with the Arbuckle study, the price tag is much higher than what you see. So we try to get the projects moving with the amount of funding that we have. Further enhancements would be very welcome.
If this program is successful, then you could also do that at other reservoirs. Is that correct?
That is entirely the point, is to come up with a strategy that would be available for other reservoirs as well as Tuttle. The dredging that took place at John Redmond was astronomically expensive, the traditional dredging, and it's just not feasible to try to do that at the other reservoirs. We're going to be paying for that for a long time. So.
Thank you.
Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a situation with the uranium in the water in the Arkansas. I look at your budget. It doesn't look like there's any money whatsoever dedicated towards helping to eradicate or study that situation. It continues to get worse and worse. Where can I find that budget, or else what is being done to help eradicate? And it's a serious problem.
Yes, that would be within the KDHE component. Kara, what's the name of, that chart that I provided you with the 4 state agencies listed? That would be within Kansas Department of Health and Environment. So yes, we are dedicating funds to addressing that. That is about the 9th page of the slides. And there it is up on the screen. That was in the non-point source program, Kara? Mr. Chair, can I have
Yes.
Ms. Hendricks help?
Just come on up to them and state your name and,
Hi, Kara Hendricks, Assistant Director at the Water Office.
thank you.
So yeah, there was the mineralization study was initiated, and KDHE is a partner in that. I believe that they utilized some of their contamination remediation funding for that study, and to pay for some of the well testing that was done out there. And we also, and KGS, the Kansas Geological Survey, was also involved. So we also put some money of our assessment and evaluation fund toward that study, that mineralization study that's ongoing right now.
So they did that well study, and it was all voluntary. What kind of response did we have to that? They were to bring that jar of water and such.
I can't, I apologize.
Disappointing is what I heard it.
I'm sorry?
I heard it was disappointing. They,
I don't have those numbers in front of me in terms of how many folks participated, but I believe KDHE can give you those numbers because they were the ones that were doing that voluntary testing for them.
I believe we do KDH&E's budget too for environment, so we get a shot at that with those folks. Senator McGinn.
On the EDIF money, I was trying to look at the audit report and can't get clarification on it. But did the audit report, do you know if it said that funding water was appropriate under the EDIF rules?
I have to punt that question. Do you know that, Kara?
Dig and find out about that.
We can,
So, yeah, so when they did that audit report, because they were talking about different programs that really weren't appropriate, and I want to know if we were appropriate, because that'll help decide whether or not we should go for these funds or not.
we can look into that, and we can certainly follow up with you.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the one page on your presentation, a question, it looks like around 2007, the legislature or someone, there's a clean drinking water fee that was established. I don't remember that, but is that the case, and was it done by the legislature? And then it looks like, because that fee brings in some funds, that the legislature has greatly reduced the EDIF and state general fund funding at times. But anyway, as far as the clean drinking water fee.
My understanding is that is when it was initiated, and that is targeted as a user fee. So it's one of those that is supposed to, the people affected by that and to benefit from that are the ones paying for it. So it's a fee that does come into the State Water Plan Fund, but it's dedicated to the purposes of clean drinking water for those that are paying into that fee, paying those fees.
Give me an example of who would be paying those fees.
It is a KDHE program. Kara, Senator McGinn.
It's municipalities that pay that.
Yeah.
It's for they take that money and distribute it all across the state. It's a really good deal for small towns because the largest cities pay the most amount of water in it, and it's based on their users. So when it's raining in Wichita and somebody's running their sprinkler, they're paying for that. And that money goes into a fund. So let's just say Tyro, Kansas, their sewer system breaks down. They don't have the money to pay for all that. So you get some of these state cost shares. So it helps a lot of small communities to do projects like that.
I appreciate that, but it still looks like apparently for funding purposes, we have used that to offset some of the EDIF and SGF money.
The intention
this
was
graph.
not to offset. The intention was to
I-
use a different set of programs.
I understand the intention, but we don't always follow intentions up here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to say it a little differently and say it's not paid by municipalities, it's paid by water users within a municipality. So our water bill has, because I live in Lawrence, my water bill has a line that says it's for this money, or this money goes to that fee. So some programs were also established at the same time. So that fee doesn't pay for any programs that were already operating, as far as I understand, within the state water plan fund that was targeted. And so now those programs are available. So it may look like the money is even, but the expenditures are up. So what we've lost by not funding the state general fund or the EDIF have been other programs within the state water plan. That's where we've seen the cuts. So it's hard to follow this, and I only know a little because I've been following it for 16 years.
But that is true. The fee funds are targeted to the users who are paying for them. And so we're not allowed to put those toward other programs. So the other programs have to be paid for with the other funds that make up the State Water Plan Fund.
Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you, Connie,
Okay.
very much for your report and information you provided. Our time for deliberation is next Tuesday, was for this committee and for this agency. And hopefully we can get some questions in between here so we can have a platform to say this is what we're going to propose for
Great.
enhancements or whatever from the committee. So,
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your thoughtful consideration.
appreciate the information you provided too. That's very important. So, and committee next, we're doing Department of Agriculture. We deliberated yesterday on that, and follow up. We have some other issues have come up and presentations for the committee, and so it's with the grain warehouse inspection program, and the Department of Agriculture we actually have a bill looking at us to work on that, but we need to talk about it. It'd be the same committee. So we're going to have a presentation today on that, what that fund is and what the enhancement was. So Randy Stuckey, please come forward. Welcome to the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, committee members. So I have Senator Randy Stuckey, Kansas Grain and Feed Association. I've mentioned to most of the committee, outside of the committee, that there is a need in Kansas Department of Agriculture's grain warehouse program. Currently, this program is funded in three ways: principally fees on industry of $332,000, state general fund transfer of $142,000, this is current, and then a transfer from the fee fund of $80,000, but that fee fund is soon to be extinguished or exhausted. It's for that reason that there's an obvious gap moving forward in fully staffing this program. Now, it's an important program for Kansas, for the small grain elevators that would otherwise have to default to the USDA license inspection program. And it's a delicate balance of the amount of fees paid under the state program versus USDA. So for that reason, we have asked, or are asking, for some state general fund transfer to help fill that gap, because otherwise it's $117,000, give or take, need to run this program. That's the gap that we're looking at going forward after the exhaustion of the fee fund. And this will happen, I believe, next year. For that reason, KDA came to industry this last fall and said, hey, this is what we're looking at. There's a gap in the budget moving forward. We're going to need to increase fees. We met with the agency, looked at different ways to assess those fees that would not force the fees to be on certain grain elevators larger than what they would pay for the federal, because if it was, they would leave the state program, and we wouldn't have a state program at that point. It'd be like a death spiral. If the larger ones leave, there's not enough money to pay for the state program. So graciously, the department worked with us to work with that fee schedule in a way that nobody's fees would be higher than the federal level. But even at that, we're looking at an 80% increase on the bushel capacity license fee in this bill that's been introduced, which we support. We'll support an increase in our fees. The issue that we're bringing to you today is because that is going to be such a large fee increase, this 80% on the licensed bushel capacity, on that $117,000 need, if there's any way to add additional SGF, currently it's $142,000, an additional $60,000 in SGF would decrease that license fee increase on us by about half, and so we would appreciate that. And like I said, this is the grain warehouse program. It's a good public service to all farmers across the state because it verifies that their grain is what the grain elevators say that it is in their storage across the state of Kansas. So it's a good program, and the ask then would be $60,000. As a compromise, we pay about $60,000 in fee increase and request to increase the state general funds up to it would be about $200,000 total annually. So that's the request, Mr. Chairman. That's the status of where the program's at. And we would still support Senate Bill 143 to increase our fees. This would just require them to be not as increased as much every year.
Okay, thank you, Randy. It's called the Grain Warehouse Inspection Fee Fund or fee?
Right, so the KDA is Grain Warehouse Inspection Program, and there's a fee fund that goes along with that. That's where the fees are housed.
Sure, but you don't actually do, what's the inspection part? You
Inspection of
the
the-
record, aren't you? There's no facility inspection, is there?
Yes, there are. That's exactly what they do is they go out, I think there's 5 or 6 staffers that go out across the state, and they do the book review, the audit, but they also physically inspect the bins to make sure that the grain is actually there. And that verifies for the farmers that their stored grain is actually where it's supposed to be.
Okay, I want to make sure the inspection was clear, plus the facilities too, so.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions? Senator Dahl?
It's time to make a motion to, I mean, this is critical for Kansas, because Kansas is an agricultural state. I think this ask is very reasonable.
We could do it now, or we deliberate more next week. We got to come back on Tuesday. But if you want to take care of it, this we'd submit to the Department of Agriculture then, whatever action happens today. If you want to make a motion.
I'd like to make the motion.
Okay, committee, is there a second? Okay. Motion been made and second to support the grain inspection fee increase. Any questions on that or discussion? Senator Pack?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The maker of the motion was rather vague in the dollar amount. Are we talking the 60 that was requested?
Just a minute.
I would presume that, but I don't want to presume
Let's
anything.
make it clear, Senator Dahl.
That's a great question. Yes, it's the 60,000.
Because I heard several figures here. I heard 117, I heard 60, and so forth. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, but for the record, 60,000 is what the ask is. Any other discussion? Senator Straub?
It's my understanding this is your compromise to the increased cost of this, correct? Is
Well,
that-
we would certainly consider it a compromise position. The default would be fee increases of $117,000 a year. So we would certainly appreciate an additional transfer of the $60,000, and we would pitch in the remainder in fee increases, yes.
Otherwise, all of this will just be passed on to the farmer, correct?
Well, it's going to be additional overhead for the grain elevators, so.
Which will in turn pass it on to the producer, correct? Yeah. Thank you.
Committee, any other questions on the motion? Seeing none, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to oppose this, but your math is not very good. Half of 117,000 is not 60,000.
Well, it's approximate.
Rounding up, huh?
You
Thank you.
have the figure at 60, though.
That $117,000 increase is going to be based upon the number of license fees and bushel capacity, so those numbers fluctuate every year.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd be interested in knowing from the Department of Agriculture what other fee inspections are also supported by state general funds. I'm assuming there are some.
Department of Ag. Introduce yourself, please. Welcome to the committee.
Hello, Chairman and committee members. My name is Kelsey Olson, and I serve as the Deputy Secretary of the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Our agency does receive roughly just under, right now it's $9 million in SGF. Those funds are spread out through most of our programs. At this point in time, our one program, the food safety and lodging program, is entirely fee-funded and does not utilize SGF funds. But the remaining SGF funds that we have are disseminated throughout all of the programs that the agency runs.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that that makes this ask seem more appropriate, that we know it's not singling out one industry, but is a practice that the state has used to support agriculture.
Senator Straub.
This question's for Randy. The fee is a flat fee of what, 1,000, I think you had said? Is that correct, the inspection fee? For elevators?
Well, I'm not sure that they assessed the grain elevators an inspection fee. It's a license fee, and it's based upon the bushel capacity. Both, it's two things. It's the bushel capacity of the grain elevator, and then an additional $500 for each location outside of after the first location. So it's twofold. It's both assessed on the bushel capacity, and there's a schedule for that, and then additional $500 per location after the first location.
Okay,
So it's thousands of dollars,
sure.
for the larger elevators.
Sure, yeah, that's what I was getting at, thank you. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't disproportionate to, and, puts smaller elevators at a disadvantage. There's obviously a number across my district. Thank you.
I think the larger ones, or the smaller ones rather, if you have one location, it's probably a few $100s, but if you're a larger elevator, it will be up in the thousands.
Is that an annual renewable?
It is annually, right?
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Not, we have the motion. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries, so we'll add that as a committee. We are almost out of time, so we will conclude our work for today, and we will take this up again next Tuesday, beginning for deliberations from the Department of Agriculture and the Water Office. Water Office will be first. Make sure we get you folks there. So, any other business? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, committee.